This is a fifth video series of advanced use of entity framework. In this video, I will show you option for improving the performance of an ASP.NET web application that use entity framework. You will learn several methods for maximizing performance or for diagnosing performance problem. Information present in this video likely to be useful in broad variety of scenarios like efficiently load related data, manage use state, and also is useful if you have individual query that present performance problem like use the NoTracking merge option, recompiled LINQ query, examine query commands into the database, and also useful that have extremely large data model like pre-generated views. First, we are going to talk about loading a related data. There are several ways that the entity framework can load related data into a navigation property of entity. First, here we are going to talk about lazy loading. When the entity is first read, related data isn't retrieved. However, the first time you attempt to access a navigation property, the data required for that navigation property is automatically retrieved. These result in a multiple query sent to the database, one for the entity itself and one each time that related data for the entity must be retrieved. So here you can see in this image. Next, we are going to talk about eager loading. When the entity is read, related data is retrieved along with it. These typically result in a single join query that retrieves all of the data that's needed. You specify eager loading by using include method. Here you can see include method. And next, explicit loading. This is a similar to a lazy loading. Expect that you explicitly retrieve the related data into a code. It doesn't happen automatically when you access a navigation property. You load a related data manually using a load method of the navigation property for a collection, or you use a load method of the reference property for a property that holds a single object. Here you can see we use a load method. Lazy loading is the default behavior that has been generated by the designer. Let me show you here in designer. Here you can see in our constructor lazy loading enable is equal to true. So in general, if you know you need a related data for every entity retrieved, eager loading offers the best performance because a single query sent to the database is typically more efficient than separate query for each entity retrieved. On the other hand, if you need to access entity navigation property only infrequently or only for a small set of entities, lazy loading or explicit loading may be more efficient because eager loading would be retrieve more data than you need. So let me show you how to disable a lazy loading. So here in our model you can find here a property called lazy loading enable true. You can set this property is false, so lazy loading enable is false. Next thing we want to talk about here is view state. In order to provide update functionality in ASP.NET, web page must store the original property value of an entity when page is rendered. By default, ASP.NET web form data control use a view state to store the original value. However, view state can affect performance because it stored in the hidden field that can subsequently increase the size of the page that sent and from to the browser. However, version 4 of ASP.NET provides a new way to working with view state, that the view state mode property. This is a new property can be set at the page or control level, and it enables you to disable view state by default for a page or enable it only for a control that needed. For applications where performance is critical, a good practice is to always disable view state at the page level and enable it only for the control that require it. So let me show you here in the page. Let's first open our instructor page. Fit in our code mode. Here you can see in our error message label we said use state mode is disabled. So I can set a view state mode disable for the whole page. So I can set this property here and set the view state mode is disabled. So, and if I need a view state mode for any control, let's say for this label I need a view state mode. So I can say enable. So now for this control view state mode is enabled. So we can set the view state mode disable for the whole page and for the all control, and later we can add a view state mode in our individual control if we need a view state mode is enabled. So with this technique we can improve performance of our page. Next thing I want to talk about here is use of NoTracking merge option. When object context retrieve a database row and create entity object that represent them. By default, it also tracks those entity objects using its object state manager. This tracking data acts as a cache and is used when you update entity, because a web application typically has a short-lived object context instance, and query return the data that does not need to be tracked. In the entity framework, you can specify whether the object context track entity object by setting a merge option. You can set the merge option for individual query or for an entity set. If you set it for entity set, that means you are setting the default merge option for all queries that are created for that entity set. So let me show you how to do it. Let's open our code repository, and now I can create one constructor, and I can set here the merge options is equal to is not tracking. So note that in this tutorial setting the merge option won't have noticeable effect on the application performance. The no tracking option is likely to make an observable performance improvement only in certain high data volume scenario. So here you can see this is my entity name, and here I set merge option is not tracking. Next thing I want to talk about here is pre-compiled LINQ query. Entity framework execute entity SQL query within the life of given object context instance. It takes some time to compile the query. The result of compilation is cached, which means the subsequent execution of query are much quicker. LINQ query follows similar pattern. Expect that some of work required to compile the query every time. In other words, LINQ query by default, not all of the result of compilation are cached. If you have a LINQ query that you expect to run repeatedly in life of object context, you can write code of the result of compilation to be cached the first time when LINQ query is run. So let me show you how to write compiled query. To do that, I need to add one class. So let's do it. New item. First, I need to add a namespace. And this will be a partial class. And here we can say private static, it only. Here we need food entity, available, structure name, say compiled structure name query. Now here I want to write query. Let's say compile query, compile. Here I want to say full entity, text, you can say from I in context dot instructor name by name select I, and also we need name, just copy. And done. Compile. To list. So let's write another compile query. Entity, format, query, compile, full entity, text, to administrator, say from text departments include unique person, left, without administrator, equal to administrator, left, here we need 52. Let's just copy. Public So here we define two compiled query, and now we can use here in our code repository class. So here we are going to use in our get instructor name, compiled instructor name, and also we are going to use here get instruct get department like administrator. Okay. Now we can go ahead and run this page. So let's run it. So let's just check all things are working fine. So here you can see if now I'm going here we can also let's update our administrator. Okay, so let's move on. So here we define two compiled query. So let's use in our code. So here you can see get instructor name. So let's use it here. Compile instructor name query. Also we are going to use here. Compile department by administrator. Now we can go ahead and run this page. So let's run. So here we define two compiled query, and so let's use in our code. Let's use here first compiled instructor name query. Also we need to use here. So now we can go ahead and run this page. So let's edit here administrator. Now we can update. So here I show you how to write compiled query and how to use it. But recompiling query adds a level of complexity in your code. So make sure you do it only for query that actually represent performance bottlenecks in your application. Next thing I want to show you here is how to examine query sent to the database by entity framework. So let's switch here in this class and comment each line of code, and now I can copy and paste this code. When you are investigating performance issue, sometimes it's helpful to know exact SQL command that the entity framework is sending to the database. If you are working with object query, one way to do this is use this method to trace string. So first I need to add one breakpoint here in our return department, and I can just go and run our project in debug mode. Now here you can see the exact SQL command, SQL query sent to the database by entity framework. This one. So you just need to click in this command text and click in here, and you can show the SQL query. So let's move on. Next, I want to show you another way to view SQL command generated by entity framework. Also, you don't need to require change your code or even set a breakpoint. So let's comment this code and get our old one and comment this code. Now switch here and run project in debug. So let's move here in Visual Studio, click on debug and click here in IntelliScratch event and click on break all, and here you can see display list of recent event and click here in audio.net, and now it's the query that is sent by entity framework. Also, if you want, you can copy this query and paste anywhere you want. So let's move on. Next and last thing I want to show you, pre-generating view. First, let me explain what is view. When object context is first created in a new application domain, entity framework generates a set of class that is used to access the database. These classes are called view. If you have very large data model, generating these view can delay the website response to the first request for a page after a new application domain is initialized. You can reduce this first request delay by creating this view at compile time rather than at runtime. To do that, first we need to add one text template, so let's do it. Give it a name. I have some code, let me test it. And you can download this code from the website. Here, right click and click on run custom tool. And here you can see Visual Studio generate a code file that create view based on template, this one. Now we can run application and verify that is work as it did before. So let's run application. And here you can see it work. Thanks for watching this video.